This customer had apparently been keeping up with all the important maintenance on their car, just maybe not the oil changes. And this, folks, is what happens when you zip tie your calipers instead of bolting them down. And this car came in after the customer had been towing a trailer and said the clutch had started slipping badly on the highway. What came off the car was not really a clutch anymore. This car came in after the wheel almost fell off due to a bad wheel bearing and hub assembly that the customer had not wanted to repair the week before when they were in for an oil change. The owner of this truck came in saying that he's been off-roading with his son for the weekend and heard a loud noise on the way back. The transfer case had blown itself open and was letting it all hang out. The owner of this car came in saying that they had a clunking sound and that their friend had fixed it for them, but came in because it still clunks when turning. This customer came in saying the ride had been feeling a little rougher than usual lately and wanted the suspension checked out. The mechanic got underneath it and found the frame looking like this. Customer states, was driving home from work and heard a loud pop. Customer came in saying, the hood just doesn't want to open anymore and I have no idea why. Customer came in because he couldn't get his oil filter off and said, I always do my own oil changes, but this year the damn thing didn't want to come off at all, so I got a bit worked up. Customer states, car's been running hot lately and the AC stopped working, probably just needs a recharge. Also, there might be a small crack in the radiator somewhere. Can you take a look? And this car came in after the owner had been weaving on the highway, but suddenly heard a strong metallic sound before the engine had turned itself off. The mechanic found a pretty chunky soup in the oil pan and the engine block to be extra ventilated. This car had been sitting in the garage for a few months while the owner was away visiting family. When the mechanic finally pulled the oil pan, what came out looked less like oil and more like something you'd find at the bottom of a swamp. Customer states, can't unlock or lock my car, please help. Customer states, got rear-ended on my way to work last week, but she drives perfectly fine, just needs a new bumper. Once the mechanic told the customer the price quote, the customer just drove away. This customer came in with his car all beat up after his wife found out that he was having an affair with another woman that apparently was also their nanny. Yikes. And this car came in smelling like a casino break room and looking like the ashtray had been managing the interior for the past several years. The owner of this Dodge rolled in because they had a whining noise after another shop that was apparently really cheap had installed a new timing chain together with an improvised tensioner. There's a reason it's cheap, folks. The mechanic working on this car found the engine wiring looking like something had been living in there for a while. Turns out the car had picked up a new tenant at some point and he'd been pretty busy with the wiring harness. This customer said that he had hired a mobile mechanic to come pick his car up for some maintenance, and this is apparently their pickup and delivery service. Hey, if it works, it works! This car came in on a tow truck after the owner had been on his way to a job interview when the front end suddenly dropped. The upper control arm had snapped clean in half and the car was only 4 years old. This customer came in saying that they recently switched their automatic for a manual, but that they've had some troubles adjusting to it and that it has started to get difficult to get it in gear. Customer came in saying that the car smokes a little on cold starts, but once it warms up, it's totally fine. Probably just needs some new oil, right? The owner of this Mercedes came in as it had started to handle pretty badly, ever since they had done some suspension and framework on it at another local garage. The owner of this car came in saying her tires were basically fine and she just needed a rotation. The inside of every tire looked like a bubble wrap factory had moved in. Customer states, battery keeps dying, not sure why. I tried a few things myself, but nothing worked. This Dodge Ram 1500 came in with quite the oil leak after the customer had done some work on the exhaust manifold, all by himself. The mechanic working on this car probably needed a minute to take it all in after he opened the hood. Epoxy on the fuel lines, exposed copper wire everywhere, a pressure gauge strapped in with metal clamps and electrical tape, and a mesh net draped over the engine for reasons that remain unknown. The customer later said that their friend had helped them out, and by the looks of it, the friend had been very busy. Customer states, steering wheel wobbles at higher speeds. This Toyota Tacoma came in after the owner's son had done some maintenance on it. The engine dipstick was almost covered all the way to the handle with oil, but the transmission pan on the other hand had nothing in it. The owner of this Ford pickup truck had let their little cousin, who's a trainee at a local garage, install new brake calipers for them for free, but had to come in again a week later as their cousin had misplaced a couple of the caliper bolts. When the mechanic pulled the oil filter on this one, it came out deformed, sludgy, and bent, like it had been having a rough time for a very long time. The owner of this Ford Explorer came in saying that he thinks he might need a new battery because the car was apparently really difficult to start. Turns out that the customer had bought one too many gadgets off of Amazon and unplugging them all fixed the problem. And this customer came in saying they have a weird scent coming from the vents. The mechanic inspected the cabin air filter and found that some new tenants had moved in and gotten very comfortable. This car was in for an oil change when the mechanic noticed the state of the timing belt. When told about it, the customer said, "I only know how to drive and put gas in it. I don't know nothing about what's going on under the hood." Customer states, "Steering has felt a bit stiff lately. Might be the servo pump or something, but it's definitely not the tie rod. My buddy just did that one, so that's solid. Has to be something else." And the owner of this Jeep came in saying she just wanted the mechanic to check her tire pressure because it apparently felt like the car was leaning to one side when driving. This customer had apparently been holding off on new brake rotors for a while. The mechanic pulled a wheel and found a rotor that had worn itself all the way down to the ribbing underneath. The owner of this car came in with a pretty long list of problems after they had installed a lowering kit that they'd found on eBay for cheap. The mechanic who pulled this wheel found the rotor, hub, and inside of the rim completely soaked in something that very much did not belong anywhere near a brake system. Turns out, someone had gone a little overboard trying to silence an annoying sound. This pickup truck was in for some new rear brakes when the mechanic saw that they had a pretty old school rear subframe. This customer had apparently decided that their engine bay was looking a little too factory fresh, so they grabbed a can of bronze spray paint and went to town on it. Customer came in saying that he had installed some tie rods by himself, but that the steering now feels a bit loose and wanted it looked at. The owner of this BMW came in complaining about it feeling really sluggish. Turns out the turbo had one foot in this life and another foot in the afterlife. The owner of this Hyundai came in with starting issues and a stereo that wasn't working after they had installed a new sound system together with a friend 4 days prior. This engine had made a fairly final decision at some point. The bottom of the block had completely let go, the connecting rods were spinning freely, and the oil pan on the floor underneath was collecting the evidence. And this car came in with quite the oil leak after the owner said he thinks he hit something that was rolling around on the highway when he was driving home from work. This customer had been complaining about their car overheating for a few months, but kept getting told the coolant was fine. When the mechanic finally pulled the radiator, he found the fins in a condition that made it look more like a musical instrument than a car part. And this customer came in saying that their car smokes too much after they recently installed a new radiator at another shop. This customer had been on her way to pick up a friend from the train station when the brake pedal went strange on her. The rotor had worn down far enough that one of the pads had slipped out entirely and was grinding into the inside of the rim, and the whole wheel was covered in brake fluid. This car came in because the customer said it had poor acceleration and had started to make a strange sound ever since their grandson had borrowed it 2 weekends prior to go see his friends. This customer came in and wanted to trade in his Volkswagen for a new one. But once the mechanic lifted the hood, he found the radiator, engine fan, and pretty much everything behind the grille looking like a total mess. But the outside of the car looked pretty untouched. Once the dealership told the customer that his car was worth pennies on the dollar, he got upset, told them to shove it, and drove away. And this customer was on his way to the shop with his old truck and was filming his friend towing him when this happened. The mechanic unscrewed the oil cap on this Honda engine and found that the camshafts had a unique DIY protection system. This car came in for its first oil change in 48,000 miles. The owner of this car rolled in saying, "I had a tiny little drip under the car, so I fixed it myself, but I still have to top up the oil here and there, so I just want to make sure I don't need to fix it again." Customer came in saying, "Had squishy brakes for a while, so I had another mechanic look at the car and he told me that everything looked fine but that I just need to replace the brake fluid." Customer states, "Wife backed into the garage door last Tuesday. Can you check if the antenna needs to be reattached? It might have gotten a little loose." The owner of this Dodge 2500 came in after they had installed a lift kit on it by themselves and wanted the mechanic to make sure everything looked good. And this one came in with a coolant system that had been entirely replumbed in white PVC piping. Customer came in to install their winter tires saying, "Don't ask, I live in a sketchy part of town, okay?" And the owner of this car came in because his truck was still leaking oil, even after he had paid another shop $500 to sort it out. They apparently even reassured him that there was zero chance of any future oil leaks. And this car apparently likes to party all the time. The owner of this Lexus had come in absolutely certain the car had a wireless charger in the center console. He'd been placing his phone on the armrest for 3 years waiting for it to charge. The owner of this SUV had their friend, who's a hobby mechanic, help them adjust their steering, but had to come in because the car now only runs in a straight line. And this car came in with what looked like a fairly straightforward oil filter swap until the mechanic cranked it and fluid started pouring out from both sides of the filter. This customer came in and said, "Got a great deal on this car from a friend of a friend, only paid $4,000 for it and they said it just needs new tires. I think it'll need a little bit more work than just that." Customer came in saying that their window regulator stopped working and there's a rattling sound from the door. This customer came in saying that he had tried to fix a brake noise, but that it had just gotten worse and that it was now also difficult to stop the car. And this customer came in saying the clutch felt a little loose, but was pretty sure it just needed adjusting. The mechanic pressed the pedal and then opened the brake fluid tank only to find it full of surprises. This customer had let their cousin, who lives in Ohio, borrow their car for the last 2.5 years and had finally got it back and wanted to change oil and filters in it when the mechanic discovered this. When the mechanic cracked open the engine on this one, he found a valve seat that had decided to go on a little adventure. Apparently, it made it as far as the piston before the trip ended. And this customer came in saying that he needs new tires and that the mechanic maybe just have a look at the back end because his buddy said it might be a little rusty. Customer states, "Friend of mine did some brake work for me, but on my way home I had to slam the brakes to avoid hitting a rooster on the road. Wheel has been dragging ever since. Please advise." The mechanic who got underneath this one found that the transfer case had cracked clean through and pulled itself off its own mounts, with the drive shaft just floating around with nowhere to go. And this car was in for an oil and filter change when the customer said, "Also, if you could please help me open this safe, it would be great. I must have misplaced the keys somewhere." Installed coil spring clamps on all 4 springs, all by themselves. The mechanic found clamps on all 4 corners, each one worse than the last. This guy had installed a new sound system and thought it needed some more juice, so he had a friend help him with the wiring, but had to come in because the car now refused to start. Customer states, "My buddy welded some stuff up underneath and it rides a little stiff now. Can you just throw some new shocks on it before Friday, cause I'm leaving town to go visit some family." This car came in because the owner said it felt like driving a waterbed on wheels after he had done some suspension work on it together with his buddies 2 nights before. And this tie rod was being held in place with enough rope and tie wraps to secure a small boat. And this customer came in because they needed a new wheel after they hit a speed bump so fast they went airborne for a short while. When the mechanic lifted the hood on this one, the engine looked like it had been trying to send smoke signals. Turns out that the turbo was bust. This car came in after the customer had attempted to fix a brake leak by himself, but it wasn't super successful. The mechanic who got underneath this one found something that would have made a plumber jealous. There was enough brake line coiled up under the hood to run a small irrigation system. This vehicle was brought in because of a loud clunka-dunka sound from the rear, and when the mechanic got under it, he found that both lower control arm mounts had completely rusted away from the frame. The owner of this Audi came in complaining about it jerking around too much during acceleration. The owner of this car had been moving some furniture over the weekend and didn't want to bother with renting a van, so he just bolted a metal bed frame straight to the roof, and you can even see where the bolts came through. This field mechanic was doing some work on this Caterpillar 69-liter V16 natural gas engine that was involved in a bit of an accident, which had caused pretty much all of the coolant to leak into the crankcase. Customer states she's been in the family since new, kept her garaged her whole life, just needs a couple things sorted and she's good for another 100,000. This customer said that he has an occasional clunk, but only when starting or stopping, and wanted it fixed. Customer states, I've driven this car for years and she's always been a dream. Shifting is as smooth as butter every single gear. Well, almost every single gear. This guy had installed a new sound system in his car, but now had starting issues and the sound system only worked sometimes. Customer states, my car has been a little sluggish lately, but I always change the oil on time, so I think it maybe just needs a sports air filter or something. And this car came in with quite the oil leak after the owner had tried fixing it with an epoxy. The mechanics were doing an oil change on this car and found the front spoiler held on by what looked like every plastic clip the owner could find at the hardware store, and a sticker just to let you know he means business. This car came in for some new tires when the mechanic noticed that someone had fixed a crack in one of the rims. The customer ended up having to get an entire new set of rims and tires. The owner of this Mercedes had apparently been driving on a tire that had started coming apart at the seams for a while. One of the loose threads had wrapped itself around the suspension and decided to stay there. And this customer had installed a new CV axle at another shop 3 weeks prior, but had come in because they've had a weird sound ever since. This guy had refurbished his brake rotors but didn't want to install new brake pads, so he now had quite the brake noise. The drive shaft on this one was holding on for dear life when the mechanic got underneath it, but then, well, he wasn't holding on at all. And this customer had changed his air filter all by himself, but had to come in because the car had really sluggish acceleration. The mechanic working on this car had it in for a tire inspection and found a large section of the contact surface had been patched with gray silicone. This truck rolled in after the customer had bought it for $1 off of Facebook Marketplace and wanted to see how it looked underneath. The mechanic said that it looks like the price was set just right. Customer came in saying that they had their buddy help them swap the rotors last weekend, but now they've got a rattle. The owner of this truck said that he had a whining noise from his differential ever since he towed a livestock trailer on a pretty muddy road the week prior. The mechanic sat down in this Jeep Cherokee expecting a standard electrical diagnosis. He found wiring on the floor, wiring under the dash, wiring across the glove box, and an engine bay that looked like the previous owner had been mid-project for about 4 years. The owner of this car came in saying, yeah, I had a vibration from the back for a while, but I fixed it myself. Customer states, installed a used radiator, but now I have this clunking sound when going over bumps. Please advise. Customer states, runs great, just needs a little bit of a cleanup and some new tires. Customer states, steering feels looser than normal, please advise. Turns out that not everything carbon fiber is actually better. The mechanic who opened the hood on this one didn't quite know where to start. Whoever had done the wiring had been pretty creative, and the air filter looked like it had been outside during Canadian winter. And this is what happens when you insist on installing the wrong sized battery in a car that has a really tight battery compartment. Customer states, I've got a couple of wires that I need replaced. Can you get it done before lunch? Customer states, my wipers think that the windscreen is bigger than what it actually is. This engine did not survive whatever was asked of it, and one of the pistons had even decided it no longer wanted to be part of the team. Customer states, automatic roll down on my windows are a bit too good, please advise. The mechanic who pulled this one into the shop found a turbo setup underneath the car that could only be described as a one-of-a-kind piece of art. This Honda was in because the owner said that he thinks something's wrong with the power steering. The owner of this Chevy Malibu came in saying the car had started feeling sluggish after he had done some work on the engine. The mechanic popped the hood and found the MF sensor sitting in there, but just facing the wrong way, which explained the problem. And this customer had done some beautiful suspension work, all by himself, but had to come in because of a loud clunk when going over bumps. The mechanic who popped the hood on this customer's car had a pretty interesting morning. Whoever had done the oil change had been very generous with oil, and the neighbors, well, they apparently knew about it before the owner did. This car came in with an oil leak after the customer said that they apparently hit a large yoga ball while driving to their morning shift. Must have been one humongous yoga ball. This customer came in saying their brakes had started making a strange sound and the pedal felt a little mushy. Turns out the brake pads had just fallen out of the caliper entirely. Must be that new extra low viscosity synthetic oil. The owner of this car said that she went back to the dealership where she bought her car to have them replace the wipers because she just couldn't figure it out herself. But the dealership somehow still managed to get it wrong. Customer states, heard a boink sound and then I had to pull over. Turns out that the customer had just installed a new wheel bearing at another shop, but they apparently hadn't tightened the axle nut properly. This customer was on her way to drop the kids off at school when the brake pedal suddenly felt like a memory foam pillow. Turns out she had some major brake issues after another shop had recently done some work on the car. This customer came in saying they recently changed transmission fluid at another shop but has had a constant whining and rattling sound ever since. Customer states, she's been sitting in the yard for a while but the engine runs great, just needs the brakes looked at before we put her back in service. This car came in after the owner said they had a terrible clicking sound when turning and a steering wheel vibration at all speeds. The mechanic found the CV axle on its last legs. And sometimes the brake rotors just need a little encouragement to come off. Customer came in saying that her steering wheel has gotten really stiff lately and thought it might be something with the power steering that needed to be fixed. This customer had stripped the entire interior of his car himself to chase a rattle he's been hearing on his way to work every morning. But he couldn't find it, so he came into the shop asking the mechanics for help, and it turned out to be a small metal bracket on the dashboard, barely the size of a thumb. Customer states, had her younger brother install new belts on her car, but now it whines a lot and has started to smell weird. And this truck had apparently been used as a submarine during hurricane season. Customer came in with his car because it still had a strange noise at all speeds, even after he had tried to fix it himself. The owner of this vehicle came in saying they had just installed some new suspension parts, but that the handling had somehow gotten worse afterwards. I wonder why. This customer came in with their Kia saying that they had just installed new brakes that they got off eBay and wanted the mechanic to have a look and make sure everything looked fine. And this car came in with a pretty loud clunking noise from the drivetrain, and when the mechanic cracked open the transfer case, it had apparently been making its very own mechanical Caesar salad in there, and the only thing missing was the dressing. And this customer came in saying that they had just fired the car up and wanted to impress their girlfriend by revving it a bit, but heard a loud metallic clunk and rattling sound before the engine shut itself off. This car rolled in because it had a starting problem. The mechanic opened the hood and found a wiring situation that looked like someone had tried to rebuild the space shuttle from memory. Turns out the whole thing came down to a clogged up throttle body. This customer came in after they said that they constantly have to top up the oil and wanted the mechanic to have a look. The mechanic found the leak and the customer ended up confessing to having changed the valve cover gasket by themselves a few months ago. Seems like a pretty decent amount of play. And this customer came in saying that a tire place had put a patch on it last week and said that it should be good for at least another year or two. This car was in for an oil change, but the mechanic couldn't sit in the cab for very long as the customer had installed their very own signature smell air freshener in the back seat. The owner of this car had a front row seat to something he definitely wasn't expecting in his own driveway after he had just finished doing some suspension work on it himself. Customer states, "I married the wrong woman and said that I wanted a divorce. Please advise." Customer states, "My check engine light has been on for a few weeks, but I've kept driving because the car still runs fine." The owner of this van chassis had purchased it from a guy for $6,000 that had claimed it to be mechanically just fine, but upon further inspection the mechanic found this. This customer's Honda Odyssey rolled in because it had some drivetrain problems. The owner had recently been to another shop and was told that he did not need to fix anything, so he had kept driving until he heard a loud crunk sound. This customer came in saying that her car had gotten really loud one day and that she tried to fix it herself using some spray foam she got at Home Depot, but had to come in because it didn't help. The mechanic who worked on this customer's truck was told it ran fine, but just a little loud. What he found was a crack in the engine block the size of a small country, and when he fired it up to show the customer, they got their own fire show. This car came in because it wouldn't start after an empty portable toilet had fallen out of a car in front of them on the highway and bounced on the hood, which had caused some pretty serious engine damage. The mechanic working on this truck didn't even need to look under the hood. The fuel gauge was having such a good time that it had started smacking the temperature gauge like it was a little brother. This Ford pickup came in because the turbo had blown up after the customer recently installed a new oil pan at a different shop. Turns out that the other shop had installed the oil pan with the protective plastic still on, which had melted and ended up clogging the flow of oil to the turbo. The owner of this car came in complaining about her steering feeling kinda strange after she had picked up a fluffy pink steering wheel cover to fix it. But it didn't do much. And this car had a bit of an identity crisis after it got a software update at a different shop. This customer had topped up some AdBlue in the driveway before heading out on a long drive to visit some family for the weekend. He made it about 40 minutes onto the highway before things got quiet. And it's fair to say that this car will end up costing the customer a smaller fortune. This mechanic had this car in for a brake concern and found the brake caliper was not properly secured, which caused the wheel to lock up as soon as the customer started driving. It ain't got no gas in it. And this car came in with a really decent oil leak after the customer's father-in-law had done some work on the engine the weekend before. This truck came in for an oil change when the mechanic noticed the professional bodywork that the customer had done by themselves. The owner of this car came in saying he just drove the car through an automatic car wash, but that he felt the steering wheel wiggle a bit too much, so he came in to have the steering checked. And this customer came in saying they have a horrible metallic noise at higher speeds after their neighbor had helped them with a tire change. Turns out that they had gotten the wrong rim size and shape for their particular car, which ended up causing quite the mess. The mechanic who opened the hood of this car was greeted by a pretty catastrophic engine failure that required a full engine rebuild with all new internals. Unfortunately for the customer, they had to pay everything out of pocket. How to know that car engineers and car mechanics are two different types of people. The owner of this car said that one of their headlights had suddenly stopped working while they were on their way to the shop for a tire rotation, and this is what the technician found. Lucky for the customer that the car frame stopped the steel piece to go any further. The mechanic working on this first generation Mustang had been inspecting the suspension, and when he touched the upper ball joint, the whole wheel assembly decided it was time for retirement.